Hi, welcome to the Great Immigrant Dream podcast, where we will talk to immigrant entrepreneurs and unravel their journey of entrepreneurship. These are people who came in with nothing to a different country with a different culture, different language, and entirely different ecosystem, and ended up creating something big in entrepreneurship and making a mark for themselves. We will capture their stories of courage in overcoming the innumerable challenges that immigrants face, their determination through all these difficulties. These are stories of immigrants who are true embodiments of the great American dream. I'm your host, Kumar V, an immigrant entrepreneur myself, and I want to inspire you to fulfill your great immigrant dream. Hi, and welcome back. I'm your host, Kumar V, and this is the Great Immigrant Dream, your podcast and YouTube cast. Today, I have as my guest Kumar Raghavendra. Yes, we share the same first name. Kumar Raghavendra is a seasoned business leader and executive with a global experience across India, UK, and internationally. He is also a life coach. He says that he's driven by a mission to drive growth and transformation. He has extensive experience in the consumer goods and in the alcohol beverage industry. He's been to your big brand names, Procter & Gamble, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, and currently he's working with VT Group as their global commercial director, managing that company's operation for UK, Europe, and even Asia. Kumar is not an entrepreneur. Despite that, I talked to him and I wanted to bring him on my show because he is an example of how you can bring entrepreneurial spirit to whatever you're doing in your life. And that is very, very important, especially for a large number of our audiences who, as I say, are still on the cusp of entrepreneurship, who are wanting to do something. One of the best ways, one of the short ways to go ahead and test it out is to test out if you are able to bring that entrepreneurial spirit to your current work. So welcome, Kumar Raghavendra here. Is there anything which I missed in your introduction which you want to add?
No, nothing. But I would want to add that congratulations on this podcast, because I think for all of us who get far in our career, there's always a moment and there's always a time when we feel and when we think that it is time for us to go back to the community and ensure they don't have to go through the similar challenges, or at least we can speed up their learning process. So congratulations on setting this up, because through your podcast, you are helping people like us reach out to the world and support us in building that dream for the larger masses. So thank you.
Thank you. And, you in one sentence have summarized what is my intent and goal behind doing this workshop. For all the success that all of us have had, I see that, a large part of it is also because we were in the right place at the right time. You can call it God, divinity, universe, whatever name you want to give. And there is no better way of kind of thanking God, divinity, universe than giving back. So this is our attempt. And thank you for acknowledging and recognizing that. And I can tell you right from the go, this conversation is going to be interesting. Okay, so let's dive deep in right now. So, Raghavendra, let's start with your journey. Let's start with, where you're from, your journey, how it has been.
I'd say when I look back, my own journey to me seems very interesting. And, when you get educated and when you are able to put words to everything that has happened to your life, it starts giving you that structure. And I'll put that in perspective. So started in a very, very humble family. I belong to a village in east of Champaran in Bihar. And the name to fame to my village is that was the land where Mahatma Gandhi started the whole Satyagraha movement. And it was a humble start. I have seen how my family has put bits and pieces together to raise all of us. And I think that somewhere was the starting point or the seed of resilience, the seed for adapting, the seed for making the choices and sticking to it. And now I can look back and say, oh, that was the time when it all started. However, it took time for me to realize that. Why is it that so many things came naturally to me? To continue that journey, humble beginning from that village, moved to Patna, which is the state capital of my state. And then I got onto the educational journey. Now, that there again was an interesting point where I do recall that, like most of us, we wanted to get into the similar stuffs of, become an engineer, become a doctor, do something which everyone is doing. And I was bad at it. I was just not feeling it. And I do remember telling my father in a very nice way through a letter in those days that, you know what, maybe I would want to do something else. Now, you can understand that coming from such a background and having a humble start, to make that choice, even for my father, would not have been easy. But at that point in time, he did take the difficult decision. And he told me at that very young age for me that go ahead and choose what you want to do. And that is where I said, good, let me choose what seems interesting. And out of nowhere, I chose a subject which I had never studied, which was economics. Got onto that. But because that was the choice that I had made, is I think why I loved that subject. Got into studying economics and went ahead doing that, till my master's. Got on to my roots, got me to get into World Bank, doing research, getting back to my village to understand what's happening with the whole education system, what more can we do. And that was really, the times when I started pushing the limits, saying, can I do things which is different, what contributes to the larger society? And I think that was the feel which, when Procter & Gamble came on to have a conversation with me, is what they saw in me, because I really resonated with Procter & Gamble's core value of touching and improving lives of people. And that was what resonated with me about the company. So that's what got me onto Procter & Gamble. It's a journey that we can talk in further detail, but I did that for a good long decade, enjoyed that journey, pushed the limits further, went ahead to build business with Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. I was leading the Moet Hennessy part of the business for India. And that's where an interesting choice came in life, which was, should we continue this journey of, getting into the senior leadership position, loving what you're doing, or is it time to further push the limit, experience a new country, experience an absolutely new industry of food, and build something new and build something different? And the choice was also around experiencing new culture, reaching out to new people, seeing the world in real sense rather than seeing it only on the televisions and only listening about it. And that's where came this choice, where I moved countries, moved to the United Kingdom. And I must say, having spent a year, that you really start life from scratch. You do start from zero, because it is not about, and then you realize that forever in our life, we keep giving importance to all the external things, who we are in terms of the role that we are doing. What do people know us for? What's my credit score? What am I known for? And when you move countries, you start from zero. No one knows you. You're there to build yourself from zero. Whatever level you move into, you start with a zero credit score, whosoever you are in whichever part of the world. And that's almost like a restart. That's where I am. That's the restart. That's the journey in which I am for the last 1 year. Loving it, almost reliving a lot of those experiences which I had in the past. But every day is such a big realization on the choices that we make, on the resilience that needs to be there, but the joy that it gives.
My takeaways, and I would want the readers, the listeners to engage here. He mentioned a couple of words. He mentioned resilience. And we will touch more upon that in the mindset part of this podcast. But he mentioned resilience. I think one thing which distinguishes immigrants always is their willingness and their ability to give up all the comfort and everything that they had in their home country and then uproot everything and then go to a different place. That is very challenging. You got to learn a different language, different culture, different way of thinking, talking, being, communicating, managing people, a lot of those things. But it's not that you're forced into that. You choose that, you embrace that, you want to accept that, and then you go ahead, you go there, and then you go ahead and create magical things there. So because this show is more focused on the immigrant dream aspect of it, so tell me more about the challenges which you faced when you moved to the United Kingdom for the current position that you have.
Let me first start with the challenges from a professional life perspective, because the first choice that I made was to move and establish myself in the professional life before I impact the personal family and bring them in. And the first and foremost was my own internal moment to adapt and to choose to be part of this place, to choose to be part of this bigger community, and to give up my ego in real sense and say that no, I'm in a place where I got to learn, where I got to just be myself, where I got to believe in the fact that people around me are here to accept me and be and operate with that very open mindset and then lead. Because I came in a very interesting situation that while I was in a leadership position, I came at the most senior position, but at the same time, I had to give up all the egos of the position, all the egos of who I was, and lead the company with the full team as that one group. So what worked for me, what I'd say was all those moments every day where I consciously stepped back and observed myself, observed what I liked through the day, observed what I didn't like through the day. And you'd find it interesting that most of those observations went back to me and my previous experiences and my ego saying, I'm a senior leader and I know what I'm doing. So it took some time. It wasn't the easiest journey, but it was very enriching because I was giving up. I'm saying that again, because I was giving up my ego and reaching out to the people as that humble individual who's ready to learn. I got the support from everyone who mattered, from everyone who then said, no, we will walk along with you because you've come with the right intention, which is to make this company succeed. And I think that honesty, that humility, that transparency was big support for me to survive and to survive well in this company, because now it's been a year and I can see who I was when I came in and where we are as a group and as a company in terms of the successes that we are getting. So that was a big one on personal journey.
Can you sort of quantify that or sort of, give some examples? You mentioned who you were and who you are now in your inner being, and you talked about your organization as well. So can you, for our listeners, can you give some context to that, please?
So when I joined this company, we were in a very interesting journey where we were moving away from an only rice company to transition into an absolutely big branded food business, getting into convenience, getting into ready-to-eat segment. And you can imagine big mindset shift that it needed for everyone around to adapt to this new journey, because there's a huge difference between selling a commodity versus selling a brand. And that's where I'd say in last 1 year, one of the biggest things that I've worked on is on the mindset, which is my mindset on how I am adapting and operating and how I am bringing the team along to choose and adapt to the new way of working on the new mindset. And to do that, at the very center was, how do we make ourselves move back to the core of doing business? It is not about the big frills and the news and the media. It is about how do you go back and do the right things on the product, the right things on the processes, and the right things on the people. So that is the big shift, which otherwise seems absolute small actions every day. But those small actions need to be consistent. Those conversations with the people need to be consistent, so that then they see the bigger picture, then they see the story. And that's what's been last 1 year's journey. And you also mentioned personally, the big shift from when I came in to where I am now is, I think, my comfort and my love for this country and my love for the place. I remember something interesting. One of my colleagues asked me a question, so do you miss your country? And my response to him immediately was, there are reasons to miss my country, my extended family, my parents, a lot of those memories which are there. But I love this country because this is the country which is giving me my dreams. This is the country which is giving me my livelihood. And this is the country which is the choice that I've made and is helping me get better. So that's the big difference that's been when it comes to me from where I came in, and I was trying to adapt and, enjoy to the time where every moment and every day is a joy, because it seems that the dreams are coming true.
Again, for my listeners, I do this after every question. I want to capture my nuggets from what I heard. One of the things was, of course, you miss your homeland. Of course, you miss where you've come from. You have ties, cultural, emotional ties, historical ties. But then you are more driven by what is next, the dream, rather than what was there, what's in the backdrop. And as Raghavendra said, being driven more by the dream that I have, and this country, United Kingdom for him, is helping him get there to his big picture dream. He also mentioned something about giving up on his ego, which I think is again a really important piece for anyone wanting to do a small business, big business, anyone in a senior leadership executive position. Do people enjoy working with you? You do not. None of us enjoy working with people who are very high on their own ego. It is all about them. No one wants to enjoy working with such people. I don't. But then when the conversation changes to what is good for the organization, what is good for the business, because all of us, and I keep on saying this, all of us are serving the needs of the organization that we are working for. We are serving the need of the brand, the image that we are. So thank you. Those were my nuggets from this conversation. So, and just to add a couple of things, I researched Raghavendra. He has been very humble in his introduction. So he was the cluster CEO of Procter and Gamble when he was in India. And then he was managing the entire country account for one segment of their business, which perhaps, if I remember correctly, was the government aspect of their Procter and Gamble marketing piece. Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy is one of the largest brands. I think that was, to me, that seems like a very interesting switch from mass-focused consumer goods company to very premium kind of, a company which sells premium goods for premium customers. And then again, back to rice and branding. But I see a commonality there. And what do you have to say about these three organizations? You talked about values. What do you have to say about the commonality amongst all of these three? From a viewer, from an outsider's perspective, all of them appear very different.
All these three businesses, with my experience and many other businesses which I've seen and which I've engaged in as my customers, the one very common thing in running a successful business is the people. Now, I think this can be the most generic answer to your question. I would delve deeper into it in what do I mean by that. Everyone who is part of your organization and who is part of your group wants to succeed, either for themselves or for the company. So at the core, the wish and the choice to succeed and do better is there with everyone. And I think it's a universal truth about humans. Right from the start, we always want to do more, learn more. That's the core. And at the same time, the one thing which, again, I believe is universal when it comes to people is that everyone wants to be respected and looked up to. And these two has been the make or break of the businesses and organizations that I've seen when it comes to people. Because what really makes the big difference is the community and the team and the people with whom you're operating. Do they have the same view of the bigger picture? Do they have a similar view of the goal? Or are they still thinking of what's my KPI? What do I need to do about it? If you're thinking about the KPI, yes, you're functionally doing the absolute right thing, but there has to be that emotion around why am I doing what I'm doing. I do remember I was talking to the new hires in P&G, and the one message which I gave them then and the message which I give to any new person joining any organization is, while it sounds big, but what's the purpose on why you're doing what you're doing? And there is always a purpose. It might be that we've not defined it yet, but there's always a purpose. When I was managing the government organization and the government part of the business in P&G, the bigger purpose, and for the viewers, what I was doing was to ensure that the P&G products reach the armed forces who were in different parts of the country through the specialized stores, which were only for them. And the bigger purpose for me then was not about, how do I ensure distribution in larger part of the country? But the bigger purpose was, how do I do my bit in serving those who serve in the country? And just this change of paradigm gives you an absolute different reason to enjoy the same work that you're doing. So, and you will find it everywhere. There was a time when I was doing a business-to-business engagement, and then we created a very interesting idea of how will we be able to provide Pampers, which was a diaper, to every newborn. Now, from a business perspective, you'll say, oh, great. So you're doing, you're building trial, the babies will trial that and their parents will like it and then they'll buy more of that product. Yeah, sounds right. That's the business view of it. But the bigger purpose there is how can we ensure that every family gets the best for their kids? Because all of us who has kids understand that. So the moment this paradigm shift happens, you get to a different level of joy for that work. So coming back again to the specific question, when I mentioned people, what it meant was, how do we bring in this purpose? How do we bring in this thinking in terms of the bigger picture on why are they doing what they're doing? And don't get me wrong, earning a lot of money, it's a purpose. And people can have different choices. But how do we link that to the bigger view? Because I'm a firm believer that humans across the globe, the bigger purpose for all of them always exists. It's not a spiritual conversation. It's a very real conversation in terms of what is that which gets them happiness, which might be family, which might be other people, which might be them doing something. And that in some shape and form needs to be linked to what you're doing 8 to 10 hours of your day, every day. If it is not linked, step back and think about it, because that is where the joy lies.
It's interesting you say that. Someone asked me a question about work-life balance a couple of days ago, and I was thinking before responding to that person, this is the line which I was thinking about. If your work is not a part of your life, but if it is antagonistic or opposite to how your life is, then you need to seriously rethink that. Maybe you're in the wrong work and you don't have to. Maybe, yes, right now, but not in the future, you don't have to. So it is as much enmeshed in your daily life as anything else, as I would say even family, because most of us, we end up spending more time at our work than more awake time with family. So, over a week, over a year.
If I may, what I'll add here is, I say this to my team members often, is the whole day of work should give you so much of energy that you enjoy your personal time. Because the whole days of work is not something that should drain you. It's something that should give you energy to go back to your family and to give them the best of you.
So let's stay on this for a minute. Let me ask you a question. As a leader who manages multiple people, how do you ensure that? How do you gauge or understand? You mentioned everyone wants to be happy. Of course, that's true. But how, as a leader, do you understand that? And how do you change things in the organization so that it sort of aligns with what they want? How do you do that? I think that will be a huge nugget and advice for leadership.
So for that, I'll give you this explanation in two parts. One is my secret sauce. One is what I use and what I enjoy doing and works. And the second is a more structured approach, which actually I learned in one of my trainings in PNG. It's available. It's fairly available even on internet. But if you live it, it really helps. So what's the secret sauce? The secret sauce is that, again, going back to the core human behavior, all of us love the freedom to express and the freedom to do and the freedom to execute. The sense of freedom brings in creativity, brings in the wish to execute, brings in the wish to push harder than you would otherwise. That's the paradigm with which I approach all of my team members, always, be it in a new role, in a new company, wherever I am, because that gives them the space to be who they are, to express. And what do I really mean by freedom? How do I do it? To give you a very simple example, I never say a no to someone who says, oh, if I had more funds, I would have done something. And my response is, you have unlimited funds. That is something which I got to create. You go ahead and think about it. You go ahead and bring the idea on the table without any constraints of what's not available. Because usually as leaders, we put ourselves in the shoes of problem solver, saying, oh, my job is to ensure that I solve every bits and pieces of problem for my team. And that's where I think we sometimes get it wrong. We put ourselves in the shoes of almost first protecting the team so that they're doing the right thing, they are delivering the results, they look good, the standard statements around being a good leader. And in that journey, we get to a very unconscious bias of almost ending up making all the decisions, making all the choices. And this is not something which I always knew. I did it like this, observed myself on what's going wrong. Why is it that my team members are coming back to me, but in a very subtle way, they know that, oh, ultimately this person will take the decision. So let him. So let me share all the problems. Let me share what's on my mind. He's my manager. He'll make all the decisions. Or he's the leader. He'll make all the decisions. And that's where I realized that what I'm doing in a very unconscious way, maybe, is to restrict them, to restrict their creativity, to restrict their wish to do more, to restrict the joy of doing things. And that's where came the secret sauce, which is how about letting the people experience freedom in true sense, and then operating as a community to support each other to make that happen. It'll amaze you and it'll amaze everyone who's listening. That is where, when people talk about, oh, how are you so agile as an organization? How is it that you have such a small team, still you are able to deliver big results? How is it that you adapt so well? It is not the leader. It is that sense of freedom because of which the same team makes the choice to be agile, makes the choice to adapt faster, makes the choice to do things beyond what might be expected of them. So that's the secret sauce.
You mentioned freedom, and I'm sure there would be other things, but let's stay on freedom for a minute. There is always a fear, which whenever I talk to small business owners, there is always a fear that at times, there is always a paradigm which says that, maybe freedom, not always. Maybe it works for a company of a different scale or size as yours. Maybe it doesn't work for a small business. That's something which I've heard from a lot of my friends and colleagues and people who I've consulted with. What are your thoughts on that? How do you manage that freedom is not leading to a space where your employees don't know what to do or they choose not to do what's required? How do you manage that space of ambiguity that comes with freedom?
That is where the second part of my response comes in, which is the structured approach. And that structured approach is the matrix where you exactly understand that once I've given that sense of freedom, where are my team members fitting in terms of the one who needs a directive approach and needs to be guided every day? Who is the one who says, oh, I'm loving it. I love owning things that I have to do and then updating you. People who are sitting in the matrix of, I can do these base set of work on my own, but I will always come back to you for guidance on these things. And that is the structured, and I'm giving it in a very normal, crude language. There are structures around this, but that's where I say that your approach with the structures which exists around, and all the structure in some shape and form, to me, talks about a similar aspect where you then lean on to understanding what's the right way of supporting each of the individual team members differently, and to not make the mistake of trying to be a lazy manager and operating in an absolutely same way with everyone, because every individual is different. So it is important, because we always end up managing large teams or small teams, but all of us as humans are complicated beings. There are emotions, there are choices, and then you're talking about freedom. So you don't know where it goes. So that's where you got to then contain the energy by putting them in those. That's what I do, put them in the right matrix. And then I tell myself, okay, I'm talking to my team member A. He or she loves to be guided and directed in what needs to be done. So I would structure the conversation differently versus someone who is more on the journey of, I'll do things on my own, and to just letting them know the bigger picture. And then they are happy, not feeling micromanaged, not feeling suffocated. While on the other way, the one who loves to be guided and directed, if you leave them on their own, they'll feel that they're just not being supported. So that's where that structure then helps me to sort of bring that balance between freedom.
And how do you find who is that person? Do you give them like a psychometric test, or is it through conversations? How do you do that?
Again, going back to the process and the structured approach, I do use the psychometric tools, which is something which even as a company we use And the first bit that I do and I have done in that is my own assessment to first understand my dark spots, my areas of improvement, my ways of working. And then I ensure that I do it for all my team members. And I do ensure that I spend time between my psychometric assessment and my team members' assessment, because there are many times where there are feedbacks for me in how I need to change my approach to ensure that the person who's working along with me succeeds. So that's the mental note that then I have, which I recall. So in a new organization, I would do that consistently for at least a quarter before it becomes a habit, and then it goes on.
So, this is very interesting because while you're talking, I was thinking about it, especially from the perspective of small business owners. Usually, small business owners do not go ahead and get psychometric tests for either for themselves or for their team. But in the end, if you're not spending that money, you're wasting a lot of money on the lack of productive hours, on things that could have been better. It's like an opportunity cost. You don't even know what would have been possible. Maybe you shouldn't have hired a certain person because that person is great. You're great. It's just that both of you are not the best fit. Your leadership style is not the best fit for that person. And you can change someone else. So I think that's very important. Is there any favorite psychometric tool? You're also a coach. So is there any favorite tool that you would recommend, which say, we can look up, all the listeners can look up for themselves and for the teams?
I won't give any specific name of a tool, but having myself done and seen many different versions and many different companies doing that, what I would recommend is first do the assessment on yourself. That's the key. Do the assessment on yourself, see what the results are, read it only with yourself, be true to it, and then it will give you a very good view of how that will fit your organization and the team that you want to build. Because I do believe that largely in terms of the tools that are available and the way the world is progressing, everyone's making it better every day. That's the approach that I use whenever I get to this position of, okay, which tool do I pick up? Use it on yourself first.
You had mentioned a little while ago in our conversation, you had said 3 words starting with a P, people, of course. You talked about process, and there was one more thing which I'm blinking on. People, process, and product, of course. So let's talk a little about process. Product is something which I think we understand better. Like all of us have our own individual products better, and we understand the consumer needs and expectations. If we don't, we need to reevaluate that because that's where it all starts. But let's talk a little about process. I want to keep the conversation to something which every single person can benefit from. He could be an employee. He could be a business owner. She could be in any other field, a nonprofit leader, whatever. So let's talk about process for a little. We touched on some bit of it, but how do you go about setting processes, especially when you are in a new organization, a new culture, a new structure?
This debate is always around that does too many processes slow you down? Is too many processes anti-agility? And I'd say whenever I join a new organization, what I've benefited from is to first spend some time understanding what's ongoing. Because even when there is no process, there is some. Because humans can't operate without a process. There is always some. It's just that people have not defined it maybe, but something exists. So the first thing for me is to step back and say, okay, how is this whole ecosystem operating? What's going on, between different teams? So you would say, oh, there should be a process of communication. People are still communicating. So what's going on? There should be a process of information flow. There should be a process of how the systems are being used, but it is still being used. So step back, assess that. Once you've assessed that, the second bit is assess the appetite to change. And why I say this is I don't want to make a universal comment saying, oh, change is good, change is bad, people resist it on. I would rather say assess the appetite, because different organizations at different point in time have a different appetite to adapt and change. The best organizations might be the worst to change if they are at a different stage of their business life. So assess that adaptability. If you assess that, oh, the emotions are too soft, not the right time to really bring in the biggest change, wait for people to settle in a bit. Take the time. And the third bit is, once these two assessments have happened, is where when you are creating the processes, bring in the same set of people together who have to live those processes to build it up. And I'm not saying this in a very unstructured way. Do it in a structured way, but make them part of the journey. Our team is part of the journey who would say, no, we do believe that this will help us. The whole journey of adapting to it becomes much more easier. So it's a very subtle way of doing things, but more than being subtle, it's about when you start the journey, step back and observe. Step back and see where the organization is, where your people are. What are those subtle processes which is always ongoing? And then define those which already exist and then create the balance.
So amazing. For all my listeners, I again want to reiterate the 3 Ps for him: people, processes, and product. And again, I think these are universal. They would apply to any organization, any person, wherever you are. I think it would apply even for your personal life. Even for your personal life, you're a product. In the way you're interacting with your community, it's bad to call it a product, but essentially your brand image is what it is. And something very significant which I picked up here was that you might recognize it or not. There is always a process. There is always a paradigm. You can be conscious of it and do it consciously, or you can stay unconscious of it, but either ways, it is always there. I think it is better to be conscious of it and create it rather than be unconscious of it and let the unconscious direct how your business, your life, your anything is going on. I think this is true even for your personal life. I think this is universal almost. Okay, I think I've read one of your articles somewhere which talks about debunking leadership myths or something around that. Tell me, let us demystify or debunk one leadership myth, one of your favorites. Let's talk about that.
First, very quickly for the listeners, why I am so much for debunking the myth is because I believe that as so-called leaders or people in the senior positions, there's so much of unsaid external pressure to be who you are expected to be. And I just want that community, this large leadership community, to understand that just being who you are is enough. You don't have to be what is being told in the best of the books, in the best of the social media posts, or from the best of the leaders across the world. Because if we be who we are, and if we are aware enough of who we are being with the people around us, I think that's the best synergy that we can have for growth. And just imagine when any leader is able to be that, how you're just shedding away all the pressures of being who you are expected to be or who you are being looked at as because of your position. So that's the reason I said, no, it is time for me to pick this up and rally this across the world, because if this helps and supports the whole community or anyone who is moving up or aspiring to get to this larger position, it's just being the same you, but knowing that what you do and what you believe will have a bigger impact. So, and I'll give you an example because that's the one.
Let's debunk one of the myths.
The myth that the leader will always have to make difficult choices. The leader doesn't always. When you are a ruthless leader, the chances of your success are very high because you can make difficult decisions, be it about firing people, be it about firing organizations. And if I can say, firing people and organization became sexy a couple of years ago because big personalities, big companies were doing that and giving the most logical reasons of that. And, choices around, there's so much of new technological advances, so people will have to lose jobs, and giving the nicest of the reasons and saying, as leader, those are the difficult choices that you have to make. No, it is a myth. It is not a universal truth that you have to be ruthless to be a successful leader. There are always different ways of solving the same problem. And I'm not saying firing is good or firing is bad. There are choices which organizations have made or will have to make in future. My core point is, don't wear the hat of I need to be ruthless and I need to just, be super professional, say what needs to be said. Don't let people around me know me enough, understand me too much, because then I might seem vulnerable as a leader. What if they start figuring out what I don't understand, what I don't know? Don't operate with all that stress and all that pressure around you. It is okay to let your teammates know who you are. It is okay to let your teammates know the problems that you're solving, because many a times vulnerability is a strength. When you can own it, share it transparently, and work together to build a future. Because sometimes as leaders and as senior management, we say, oh, big team, big group, let's find the weakest link. Why are we slowing down? What is pulling us away from the goal that we want? And we are always a set of smart people who is always find a weakest link who is not us. But the question is, how about stepping back and saying, what will it take? And maybe does it take something which needs to be done differently in me or with me to ensure that the whole company and the team succeeds? Or should I continue wearing that mask of, oh, I'm the leader, I'm always right, and I need to take few difficult choices, which is pick the weakest link and make a choice.
That's an easy thing to do rather than the right thing to do. So I get that. And I was thinking about something. I, as a person, I would rather want to be friends with or work for someone who is honest about what they are, even if that is socially not okay. But if they are honest about that, I would rather choose to be friends with that person than someone who is putting a mask on and that mask looks really nice, really awesome. But if I do not know what am I dealing with, I would rather want to be working with a socially not okay, but transparent person versus a socially awesome, but I don't know who you are person. So I think that's true for all of us.
And just imagine we as leaders or as senior members of the team or as managers, we say, oh, I understand my people and that's his strength or that's her weakness or that's her strength, that's her areas of improvement. Do we really think our people don't understand us of who we are? But we sometimes end up operating from a position that, oh, it is just my job to understand them and I will see what needs to happen with them, but they understand us as much. So if we give them that space, how about seeking few feedbacks? How about listening to them and saying, oh, thanks for figuring that out. I know that's something which I need to get better at, but now together we can make it work because it is an unconscious bias that I have or a weakness or something which is my opportunity. Why don't you nudge me whenever you see me falling in that trap?
And that requires a lot of courage, given the way it is expected that leaders be. That requires a lot of courage. But yeah, valuable piece of advice. Yes.
That leaders are always right? No, not at all. Maybe the leaders are always right because the people who are part of your team never said a no and never told you that, you know what? You've not been right for a long, long time. And I'm the fifth person doing the same job.
That's a lot to think about. But I'll change gears a little here. Tell me, in our bid to try to understand the person behind the leader that we just spoke to, tell me a couple things which have inspired you. It could be a couple personalities, movies, books, whatever. Tell me a couple things which inspire you.
The first person who inspired me and I think who's been inspiration for most of us as humans is my parents. And the specific thing I'd mention is I remember that the first time I got a job in my life where I was a manager, I called up my dad because you're suddenly out of college and you're expected to lead people. And his advice to me was, speak to each and every member of your organization, spend time with them on day one and understand them on what they want from their life, on what they want to do. Just be with them. And I did that. And I think that was one of my first and biggest learning when I started hearing the kind of things that people wanted. It was not about, oh, I want to get to a higher position for everyone. Getting to a higher position was there for few. Getting back to their family and just relocating was choices of few. Wanting to do some other work than what they're doing was choice for few. And wanting to not move to a different position, but to keep doing the same work was also choices for few. And that is when I think that was the starting point for me to realize everything over the long journey that I have had so far on how people operate differently, But if you open that conversation, open that dialogue and space, you will get to know them, and it'll add to value to you as well. So that's where my father then, takes that first spot in terms of people who's inspired me. And then comes my mother, where it was all about discipline. The way I saw her leading the life, doing her work, raising all of the family, supporting my father, was where the whole idea of, oh, you can multitask and still be successful and still enjoy because you have a purpose of doing what you're doing. And that is where the whole idea of why are we doing what we are doing, and why is it that so much of effort through the day is still giving us joy. That is where that learning came from, that, oh, if there's a reason, if there's a purpose, the full days of work gives you more joy and more energy to keep going. So that's the personal set of people. And in the external world, who's really inspired me is Tony Robbins. I, of course, got to know more about him once I got onto my coaching life, and once I got more into that journey. And there's something specific which I like about him is how he is so real. I see that he's that one person who would not shy away from saying what he has to say and absolutely ripping open the human emotions and being real about it. And that really resonated with the way I see things, which is about step back and first observe yourself and then have the story clear. So that's the one who I would name in the external.
I've watched one Netflix show which Tony Robbins has. It says, "I'm not your guru." And parts of that show, it is amazing, where in a 2 minutes, 3 minutes conversation, he just opens up the deepest wounds, the deepest sort of, bottlenecks, and he just cracks it open. It is amazing. I saw that and I'm like, wow, that is fantastic. That is another level altogether. So yeah, I agree. Perfect. Okay. Tell us what's next for you. We talked about your journey, Procter & Gamble, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy. You are leading the global operation for VT Group, company based out of United Kingdom. What's your big picture plan? What's next for you? What's your big picture plan? Let's talk about your vision, your purpose. We talked a lot about purpose. Let's talk about your big purpose.
Yeah. And that's where I go to where we started this whole conversation. Like now, the big purpose which has been there for me, and I think that's the journey I'm on, is that now it is time for me to spread this across the world and across the leaders and the aspiring leaders, that in this very, 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 very fast-paced and busy world, pause, take that moment, step back, observe who you are being, and then make the choice. Because leadership in itself is a journey. Who we are being as a leader, we are impacting generations, because there are thousands and thousands of young people who are looking up to us, who are saying, oh, I want to become this person. So the amount of responsibility that's on us beyond the work that we are doing, beyond the businesses that we are doing, is huge. I always believe that every individual is changing the world every moment. It's just that they haven't observed it or seen the impact immediately for themselves. But everything every individual is doing is changing the world. And that is where I am on this mission, to let everyone around, every leader, every aspiring leader understand this and then make the choices. Be who you are. Take time for yourself. Step back in this busy world and pause, and then go back to humans as humans. And that's the joy. That's the joy of being a leader, being you. And that's the joy that you got to spread. That's the big picture. And every work that I'm doing, every professional job and career that I'm into is something where I'm learning and doing more of it. So that's where it fuels that bigger purpose for me every day.
My takeaways from this conversation have been being okay with your own self, accepting your own self. I use this phrase, it all starts with me. So it's kind of accepting your own self rather than the made-believe version of what it should look like. Treating people as human beings rather than just, any other way, and numbers or whatever. And then knowing the person behind that name, knowing the human being behind that name, and pausing. That is something which all of us need to do a little more, pause, reflect, and then act rather than just act. So that's amazing. Any final message which you want to give to our viewers, our listeners?
My final message to all of us around who's listening, who would listen to us, is there's a lot of fun in observing ourselves. Just use that trick. It's fun. Use that trick. It'll teach us a lesson of you.
Observing yourself. Yes. That reminds me of that book by Viktor Frankl, where through his story, he exactly talks about that, how you have that choice, how you have that space. So amazing. Thank you for this very insightful conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we had Kumar Raghavendra with us here, senior business leader all through his life right now in United Kingdom, an immigrant to the United Kingdom. We talked about leadership. We talked a lot about mindset. I shared my nuggets from what I heard from this conversation. I would be interested in knowing what's your best takeaway. And wherever you are in your life, you could be in a job, you could be a self-employed person, you could be a professional, you could be an athlete, you could be whoever you are. Really important nuggets in managing oneself and in managing people. Thank you. This is your host, Kumar V, signing off for today. This is the Great Immigrant Dream. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Great Immigrant Dream podcast. Keep dreaming, keep striving, and remember, the immigrant spirit knows no bounds.